Everybody is on alert because we don't know what the trigger is for the public to go into that crisis mode. And that's when it gets really, really dangerous. I think that once the public starts to panic, I think we have about 6 days to get to wherever it is that we're going to go. It is.
And good afternoon, everyone. Today with me, Lynette Zang. We've had a couple of talks before, always on finance, the economy, a little bit of prepping, homesteading. So how do you wind this into one single, vision of the future and more of the trend, how it's going to go? And then if we encounter some problems, then how could we prepare ourselves? So when their problem arises, you're just like, okay, this is my next step. I've already planned it.
And let me ask you something with your farm. If somebody came to you and said, hey, can I volunteer on your farm for a day's worth of work, right? That's all I want to do is I want to learn how to do this, or I want to help you out, and created that relationship. If they came to you when you couldn't get food out there and you knew who they were because they created community with you versus somebody that you did not know who they are, who are you going to share the excess food that you have with?
The person who's worked with you before the crisis arose, because the crisis arising is just a bunch of vultures coming in because they know you have resources. And plus, the trust is a big thing with me anyway. Not, okay, on a personal side level of trusting people and friendships, okay, that's one thing. But to actually trust somebody enough to allow them to come out and live on your land. I talked with Jim Gale. He runs Food Forest Abundance down in Florida. And they have a bunch of Airbnbs and different kind of things. If you want to work, you can stay at this one for free. And they have lodging for you to stay down there. But to have people on here to trust them to come in, because what Jim told me was out of the hundreds of people they had like 3 different problem people where they're suddenly like, well, I don't have any place to go. I can't really leave. Can I just stay another day or whatever? And eventually they had to like throw these people out because even in the calm times, you're going to get people who want to stick around that really don't have anywhere else to go. So if you're looking at it from this thing, your number one factor is what kind of skill set do they have?
Exactly.
And is there any way to double check or background check them to be, if you're like, hey, I just want to background check and make sure you don't have a criminal record, at least just put your name in Google and I can see, obviously there's all those kind of report sites now. Like, how do you trust is my whole thing, is because when people get on the land, not so much here, because our like squatting laws are very tough here. You can't squat anything here pretty much. And all I have to do is get a contract and give it to you, Lynette, and you move in and kick those people out. So here that's a no-go. Like California, very different, but here. But how do you get people out that, they got to have the skills. You got to be able to trust them. They need to be not drug users. Yeah, I'm a fan of, glass of wine here, but no drugs. And tobacco, not much either, like if you have these addictions that are going to grab onto you during these times, it can be very, very, very difficult to just go cold turkey of something that you've been using. I've been trying to wean myself off alcohol too. It's been a years plus long journey down to the point I don't really drink anymore at all. I make the alcohol to do for distilling. Yeah, well, we need to taste it as we're going along to make the cuts, but we're at the point now where if anybody has a dependency on something, and that includes your prescription medicines, you're going to need to think about that, because if the system gets cut off or it hyperinflates, these things that you take for granted, like if you smoke cigarettes and even if you roll your own, that's going to be very difficult to come by. It turns out the key to losing weight and keeping it off is not carbs or fat or even probiotic-rich foods. Nope. The end game of having a healthy weight, as well as more energy and a long, healthy life, comes down to a specific switch which you can flip in your body to flush out unnecessary calories. Dr. Stephen Gundry is calling this caloric bypass. And by activating this specific process in your body, he's seen thousands, yes, thousands of people dramatically improve their health, even at age 50 and beyond. This includes losing weight, getting tons more energy, and returning to the good health that they had in their youth once they simply addressed this one key to better health. Dr. Stephen Gundry has lost 70 pounds himself using this research and has kept the weight off for over 20 years and counting. His digestive issues are gone, his health is fantastic, and he feels younger and healthier today than he did in his 40s. His video has been watched by over 20 million people to date, and you can watch and learn more about it at thehealthyfat.com/adapt. And he'll teach you exactly how he's kept his weight off for free at thehealthyfat.com/adapt. Click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video.
Right.
And alcohol is going to be very difficult to come by unless you create it yourself. And if you're smoking weed, yeah, you can grow that yourself, which is a tradable, always has been. I don't know, people's preference on that. But anything that you have a dependency on, and especially if it's some kind of, hard drug, don't even talk to me. I don't want to know you. Just stay away from me. That is a bad thing. The energy is negative. I don't want that around me. I don't want that in the sphere of influence of me. I only want positive things that are growing and nurturing out of, like, the great creator actually comes more light and productivity and love out of this land and people surrounding here that can take advantage of it just because I was at the right time and the universe gave me the perfect time to buy. Now I want to repay people with that. But you got to have, there's a whole bunch of checks and balances of getting somebody on the land. And if I know you in my community and you already have a reputation, I haven't seen you getting arrested and getting all tweaked out and causing problems everywhere, you are absolutely welcome. Way in advance, way in front of the line of anybody else where I go, wow, I got this. I'm a carpenter. I'm this and that. I got 65 years of experience. And hey, give me a, no. I know I rambled on that, but there's a lot of things to consider getting people on your land. It's very dangerous if you just take anybody at any time. You really are going to have to vet these people. And in a crisis situation, I think it's too late to even go that route. But having people originally, I mean, what do you think, Lynette? If somebody comes out and says, hey, Lynette, I can do all these things. Can I come and stay up at your mountaintop place? You're going to be like, I don't know.
I'm going to do some background checks, but we are, pre-screening so that, because up on my bug out location, I'm setting everything up for a community of 40 people. And to your point, and this is what I tell people too, when we're talking about barterability, the reality is that any skill set that you have is barterable, but you want to establish that community first. You need to really vet them, because to your point, you don't know who you're getting if they just say, oh, I'm going to come on and live there. And once they're on, to tell you the truth, it's hard to get people off. So you have to be picky, and that's why I encourage everybody to build your community now. Go to the farmer's market, get to know who's growing your food. Go to the farmers in your community, volunteer, give them a day of labor, and get to know them and keep going back and develop those relationships, because when this crisis becomes apparent to everybody, and that's what I'm looking for. And people say, well, when are you going to your bug out? Why didn't you go yet? It's about the public losing confidence. That's what it is. That's why it didn't happen, last year with the regional bank crisis, because they covered it up really quickly. So it never really trickled down to a public panic. That's what puts all of this in jeopardy. And I can tell you, David, I sent out a message. I said, everybody in our community, make sure your gas tanks are topped off and keep them topped off, because when people panic, are you going to be able to get gas at the gas station? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Get your food together now. And it's definitely volunteering with local farmers so you can get fresh, but it depends on where you live. There's always a way to prepare for it. I get people that ask me, they live in high rises in the city. They typically have community gardens. Even in cities, maybe you have enough space for a little shelving, a typical shelving tower, and you can create an aquaponic system that can give you some fresh food, and you can freeze some sprouting seeds like broccoli, which is uber nutritious, and you rinse it off for 3 days and you have fresh food. So people really need to get prepared now, because I'm in agreement with you. I think that this was the final breakdown. And with the Bank of Japan backing up, and that the carry trade, right, where you're going to Japan because they had interest rates so low for so long, borrowing a bunch of money and then going out and putting it into stocks or bonds or real estate or derivatives or whatever they're going to put it in, that whole thing still has to unwind. Now, they haven't reduced the interest. Bank of Japan hasn't reduced the interest rate yet, but that's next. And it should be pretty obvious to everybody where the markets are now dictating to the central banks, because they can easily, they're garbage products, those big fat derivative bets that we can't see. You know they have to be exploding, but we can't see it until it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, and one last point here, skill sets. I would encourage you to watch Little House on the Prairie. Like, those are the skill sets you need. If you want to talk about basics, you got the store owners, you got the sundry goods, you got the dried goods. Take a look at what's in some of the scenes of those going into the home store to look at. They got dried oats, they got salt, they got flour, like, and the things that you're gonna have to cook on your own, and just the basic skills of shoeing a horse. I don't know many people. How many blacksmiths do you know? I know one. Hardly anybody around. Welders, yeah, I know a few of them. But again, if you're talking about welding, they're going to run out of gas eventually. So where does that come in? But I'm just throwing that out there as a thing. So Lynette, I do thank you for your time. I just want to ask you maybe one or two more questions here. So that panic is planned. So it's not panic now, but when the time comes, I firmly believe that the panic will be induced on purpose. It will be a purposeful push for the panic to then flip all these switches to make the move for the unwind, and then cascade everything. I don't know if they're waiting for some sort of Middle East thing to happen when oil prices could spike and then, stocks go down again or whatever. But if we're coming into a hyperinflation event, do you think like 1,000 to 1 for a US dollar on a reset is within the realm of possibility, or is that too high?
No, I mean, I think, globally, 1,000 to 1 is the average. It could be higher than that. It could be lower than that. So I'm not really sure, but the reality is you've only got officially 3 cents left in this anyway. It has really no value. And, here's what I think is going to happen. I do agree with you, because they're trying to do a controlled implosion, and the control isn't so that you don't see it as much until they're ready. Then they really panic and really, really, really be freaked out, so that they could come in with their CBD solution and go, oh, this will save you. Look, we promise, if you let us have this, there will be no inflation. Because these are their words, not mine. We can have our finger on that button, and there are no limitations to how low interest rates can go. No, there won't be inflation. There'll be complete deflation, where they take away all of your principal and you're left with nothing. And that's why you have to be as independent. And, variable rate debt really does put you in jeopardy, but fixed rate debt, that's what they count on. That's what the central banks and the governments count on to repay this debt in this country, dollars that have absolutely zero value. And we can do the same thing just by holding our purchasing power intact. So what's overvalued now and what's undervalued, which is gold and silver, that flip-flops. And then that puts you in a position to buy all those farms around you. That puts you in a position to buy those income producing assets. And, just because they want to digitize assets to inspire you to liquidate, that you can turn it around and you can acquire as well. But you've got to be in a position that you are not forced to digitize your assets. And therefore, one of my big things, and I really saw this when I went to Australia last year, is this community piece. That has arguably become the single most important piece, because you and I have been working on this for a very long time, right? So I know I'm more prepared than pretty much anybody else that I know. But the reality is I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be. So I hope we have another minute, but I am fully prepared if the 40 of us needed to go up to the bug out today. Everybody is on alert because we don't know what the trigger is for the public to go into that crisis mode. And that's when it gets really, really dangerous for us down here. So security is another huge thing, but it's security in all of those mantra pieces. You want food security, water security, your barterability, are your talents, anything physical that you have. Learn some new skills. I mean, they could come to you and say, okay, you need some help with irrigation? Tell me what to do and I'll do it, right? So I think that now is a great opportunity to learn a new skill set and become more valuable to yourself and to your neighbors. And I think it's critically important that we do community in two ways. One is locally, like we're talking about, so that you can create that security in your food and your water and all of that. But we have to do a very quiet and peaceful revolution on a global basis. And we can do that just by converting their garbage into sound money. This is a sound money movement. And if we come together, we will have to have a seat at the table, which means we will have to have a say in the new monetary system. And that's what I'm really fighting for. Because if we don't do that, then you're going to lose all of your freedom, because that's where we're going. And we're going back to feudal times where you just have a few people that own everything and everybody that rents. And me, I'm old. I figure I'm going to be around maybe another 30 years, but I have children, I have grandchildren. I will someday probably, I hope, have great grandchildren and on and on. So the battle for this freedom and to take the soundness of our money back, it is within reach. You just have to convert. And it's still interesting to me how many people go, well, yeah, I know this, but I don't want to part with this. Why? They're taking it away from you anyway. There's virtually no purchasing power left. It's just about confidence. This is a con game. Don't be conned anymore. Every single person watching this or listening to this has been conned since the day you were born. And there's so many different ways that they can confiscate your wealth and your time. That's really what your wealth is. Your labor, your work, your whatever you've attempted to accumulate. And they just don't call it confiscation. But gosh, inflation is a form of confiscation. Taxation is a form of confiscation. Financial repression, which has been a constant, don't hold me to this, but I think it was since 1948, we have been planned in a perpetual state in the U.S., in a perpetual state of the Fed policy, which is financial repression, which basically means that you as an individual are forced to take risks to just keep pace with this ridiculous inflation. And those are all forms of confiscation. So when I have people say, oh, they would never do that, then you're being blind in the face of reality, in the face of your own personal experience. The problem for the central banks, the problem for the governments is that the level of confidence in those that are running all of this and in the systems that they have just destroyed. I mean, there's so much garbage in the Wall Street system. The problem is that trees don't grow to the ceiling. You always have to have that pullback, and this is all about transferring not just your wealth, but taking away your freedoms. And I'm saying, take them back. Take them back, and we can do it peacefully. We can do it quietly, just by getting out of their system. Just by having the ability to say, nope, not going to digitize my home. I don't know if they can do something to force us into it. I don't know that. That's way above my pay grade. But I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to volunteer it. That's for sure. And the way that I'm going to do my best to ensure the most positive outcome for my family in the future is by making sure that I have a sound money foundation that's outside of the system, because this has the broadest base of functionality being used in every single sector of the global economy. So this is the foundation, but you gotta also have that food, water, energy, security. If you have a medical illness, I kind of put medicine or a good medicinal garden. I mean, we have to be prepared now. There is no more time left. There's no more time left. Maybe days, weeks, maybe even months, because this is an election year. But maybe not. Maybe not.
We're dangerously close to the edge. One last question for you now. Yeah, I might want to say something a little woo-woo here, but since you mentioned serfdom, when we think about serfs and that sort of, they're usually around 1200, 1300, Dark Ages serfs type thing. I'm just wondering if that was a cycle that as they came into the 1100s, 1200s or so from the birth of Christ era, that when the Roman era had ended its money supply and converted over and everything around, say, 700 AD transitioned, did they experience the exact same thing, which brought them to serfdom? And now we have come right back up to where the Romans were, and it's about a 700 or 800 year monetary cycle to completely restructure, wipe out all debt down to zero, take everybody to serfs, and then start the exact same system again that runs for multi centuries, not just the US dollar that's 120 years, or the British pound that was 90 years, or some like guilders that was 70 years, but something on a 500, 800 year cycle. And are we just getting pushed back in to become serfs again? Because, going into the pre-Greek era, when you come around that last grand solar minimum, say 400 BC, which is, one of those eras in time that's demarcated into a shift also. So what is it about these time frames that keep marching forward? I know it's a little woo-woo to say that perhaps this is just a giant cycle that we're just getting roped back into again, but serfdom's part of it before the entire debt system can be restructured. But I would encourage everybody out there to have an ejector seat plan as well, yes, because gold's used around the world. If it does get too bad here and something goes catastrophically wrong, you're going to have one of two choices. You're going to stay here and fight this, and you may not make it, or you having a chance to eject with that gold and silver and go to other parts of the world where there's no chaos, abundant food, completely stable economy, barterability is in play, and you're bringing something that fits right into the new system called gold with you.
Exactly.
You're gonna have multiple plans here, because I thought I would never leave my house, but the forest fires last year, I'm like, damn it. I might have to leave this place because of the forest fires. Now, my bug out plan was never a bug out plan, never had one. It was like, we're staking our ground. I'll die in this house. You're not taking me out of this place. We're not leaving. This is the end of the road here. We're against the forest with millions of acres. But that's the problem. There's a forest with hundreds of thousands, millions of acres all surrounding us all around here that catches fire every year. And I'm thinking, damn it. This is the one thing that I have to consider is I had to rework my bug out plans because I never considered them before. But that was a complete blind spot on my own end for being completely unprepared, of having a grab my metals, grab my important, grab my sticks, grab my digitized, everything I've done on the Adapt 2030 channel, and get it out in the car and get out of here in under 20 minutes or under 10 minutes, however fast. I don't know. It's a weird world. Like, just one thing, how in the panic phase, how long do you think they're going to run that? And then, I'll leave it there.
Well, okay. I think that once the public starts to panic, I think we have about 6 days to get to wherever it is that we're going to go. And I say that because most people, you know this as well as I do, most people maybe have 3 days worth of food in their pantries, and the grocery stores have another 3 days on their shelves. I mean, the food supply chain, we've got fewer farmers out there, and we've got more of the large corporations taking over and putting garbage in our food. So I think that we have about 6 days from when the public realizes what's happening and starts to panic. That's what I'm counting on. And I'm not waiting those 6 days. When there is an event and I see that, then we're up the hill, and like I said in the beginning, I put out a warning Sunday night that everybody needs to make sure that their tanks, their gas tanks, are full. And frankly, I never let mine get below a half a tank because that's about what it takes me to get to where I need to go and bug out. And you have goats, right?
My neighbor does. We had sheep before, but we didn't have enough pen space for them, so they ate everything down. They like where we had their pens were too small. Another thing for animal husbandry, not doubling, not tripling, but like 5x larger than you think it's going to need to be. Because we had a month and a half long drought here, and the sheep that we originally had, we had 3 sheep. So I sold them off to my neighbors, traded one back to the Amish, and we harvested that, and they gave us a heavier weight because we'd brought it up from like, I don't know, to about 30 pounds up to about 90. And then there was a trade-off, so we didn't have to pay much for the animal because we raised it up. Animals are a lot of work. And any of you think that you're just going to go out and like, even with me with the chickens, ducks, and the geese and the turkeys that we have, it takes me a fair good hour in the morning to go around and clean up, check on them, make sure they got water, got the feed. And then I'm worried about feed. What if the feed cuts off? Then, you come back with 2 tons of feed. Is that enough? But then the mice got into it a little bit. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to think about moving forward with this. I mean, go ahead.
I was going to fire mitigation because those are the kind of animals that, to your point, I mean, you have to keep them out of the gardens, mind you. But I'm also in a very heavily wooded area, and we spend an awful lot of time mitigating for fires because that is an issue.
Yeah. And then so you're saying, so the panic phase, 6 days until the real event, and then that would run for 9 months on a restructure. Is that kind of like, I guess that's my last thought.
I think the restructuring, I mean, they have an awful lot of debt and derivative. I mean, we don't even know. It's like they're saying that there's still about 4 trillion left in the carry trade to unwind.
That's a lot.
You really know. I think that's garbage because it's so leveraged into these other fiat money assets and derivatives, that I would think 4 trillion is chump change, right? So I can tell you that I have enough long storage food and some fresh food and stuff, and we put in 2 orchards last spring. So, to create more food, but I have enough food right now without planting any for about 6 months for 40 people. And then of course we'll plant and we have eggs and we have all of that ongoing. I've built my barterable position for 10 years because I think it's going to take a lot longer to work through. We don't even know what we have to work through yet. And if it doesn't take me 10 years, which I hope it doesn't, and I'm not saying that I would necessarily have to be in bug out for 10 years. We have to see how long it takes for them to generate some level of calm. But as long as people are hungry and hopeless, I'll be at my bug out.
There's nothing left for them. Hey, the best time to plant an orchard?
Today.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another mistake I made too, if you're taking notes and you're looking for mistakes, learn from me. We planted our trees too close together, even though we had dwarf varieties. We set them at 15 feet spacing. I definitely would have gotten 20, 25-foot spacing. So even on your spacing on an orchard row, because if you let it get away, like we were traveling and when we came back, it was already in spring and they were starting to blossom out and I didn't want to cut them. And I missed that pruning time because we were out traveling for the winter. But anything you're going to do, you're going to have to think far larger. So animals go 5 times larger than you think you'll need for the spacing. Tree row spacing, at least double. Again, for me, 15 foot, I really probably would like 30 instead of 25. But, I don't know, there's so many things to think about. It's going to be like a Rubik's Cube of solutions. And the only thing I can say about this is, if you think your life is stable, there's going to be no more stability. You're going to be thinking, changing, morphing every single day, possibly even multiple times a day as we move through this. So you're going to have to really train yourself to think on the fly and know those decisions that you've made are ones that are quality. You already had some pre-planning for planning, at least on some contingencies of some events, but others you're just going to have to work to on the fly. In the military, I mean, things go wrong all the time. Everything go great planning until the first shot, and then boom, and it's all gone. So, I mean, you're going to have to this is skill set too, of being able to make second decisions. I know they might not be always the correct one, but you need to stand by that with 100% authority that that's what we're doing. It might not be the best outcome every single time, but if you're in that mindset of this is what we're going to do, no changes, do this, at least the possibilities of good choices are going to be better than like, I don't know what to do. What do you think? That's not a great thing to be talking about in an emergency situation. Like, I don't know what to do. What do you think we should do? You already be like, all right, here's our plan right here.
Exactly. And I want to bring up, since you brought up the military, I also think that this has been hammered into me because I worked with some ex-military on our bug out plan. But what they told me, and I believe it, and it's really interesting because when I attempt to get others into that prepping mentality, it can be a little challenging because they're not used to it, right? But what does the military say? They say 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So, you really have to make sure that you have backup, boo-hoo if you have more than what you need. Who cares? You can share it, you can barter with it, you can do all sorts of things with it. But you really need to be in a position where, like, I sleep at night because I know if I got to leave here this morning, we have a plan. We have a place to go. We have food to eat. We have water to drink. We have security. We have all of those things. It's completely off grid. I do have a generator backup and many tanks, multiple tanks of natural gas, but we are really off grid. I put a lot of money into the solar to move it. And I think the time to get prepared now, and you'll want to have your sound money foundation. We are too close to the end of any kind of calm into this next phase where all of this debt has to be restructured. All of it has to be restructured. That is not an easy thing. That is not, and an unwind of all of these big, huge bets. I'm telling you, you better be prepared.